Welcome to the Week 17 NFL Slate Breakdown for FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Russell Clay. Friday afternoon, Eastern Time. We've been putting off this breakdown for a few days now. Usually we try and get it out Wednesday, Thursday, but news keeps piling on for Week 17. If you're playing, God bless your heart. You're a savage with the rest of us. If not, and you're just enjoying our witty commentary, then God bless you too.
It's Friday afternoon. The vacuums are sounding. The dogs are barking. Just a great day in Western Mass. It's freaking -1 degrees outside. This slate just pisses me off. Just everything is awful right now. And that's just, being a Massachusetts resident. Things are just awful all the time. And life is terrible. And, I just feel like creating fake usernames and trolling on message boards right now, but I'm not gonna.
Well, it's good. I'm glad you're stooping. It's kind of cooled off down here too. It's a mild 70 degrees today in Central Florida. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mild, yes.
So
sounds great. But back to the slate. The latest news I think we can touch on is DeMarco Murray ruled out. Well, I don't know who's buying that garbage, but I'd bet a lot of money we see him Sunday morning suiting up, testing out that torn ACL, giving the thumbs up. Oh, yeah, it's fine. I'm fine. No. What was that? Derrick Henry's going to get 20 touches? No, he's not. Not on my watch. He's not. He's going to get 12 because I'm going to be in there for 8 touches, and then I'm going to get hurt again. But I'm going to be in there. 6 rushes for 5 yards.
You've been kind of advocating for more, Henry touches for quite some time. So this has to be somewhat bittersweet for you.
This is hysterical that it's a week 17 when it couldn't even be week 16 when maybe you carry Derrick Henry along on your roster all year and season long. No, couldn't even give us that, DeMarco. You son of a gun. You son of a biscuit.
Oh, I'm sorry, Russ.
This slate is how, and you said something about the slate being terrible, and I said, I'm going to nuke a third world country because of this. This is how wars get started.
Well, I mean, for people that know us, you don't drink alcohol, but I do. So I'm going to crack open a beer because this slate is just god awful. So I'm going to pour that deliciousness down here.
Okay.
And it's a little J-Dubs IPA. Shout out to Denny Carter, IPA king of the world. And
let's J-Dubs IPA.
Let's get rolling. Let's get rolling into quarterbacks here.
I don't want to.
Well, we have to, Russ.
Okay. Yeah, we have to. Yes, we do. Yep. No, we definitely couldn't just end it right now. No.
A few quarterbacks with stuff to play for this week. I think that's kind of always the question of Week 17 is, do people kind of put their focus on, teams that do have stuff to play for? And I tend to agree. I think there are a few teams that you can really key in on their passing games and you'll know that the attempts are going to be there. And then we get some games where guys are just kind of playing for stats. They're playing for trying to get roles next year. I mean, we have to kind of look at all options here.
Well, if you're going to play the slate, it's very important for you to realize that if you just focus on the games that matter, you're going to lose. Those are important and those are the easiest to break down. But the fact of the matter is there's going to be some running back that goes for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns against third string tacklers. And, you're going to have some exposure to that guy. And I just think, I'm only speaking from experience from past years where I've focused my Week 17 slate on games that matter or teams that matter, and you can hit those, but then you got to get those third stringers right in Week 17 as well. It's kind of like preseason,
Yeah, and that's the crucial thing. I mean, I think this week I kind of want to start reversed at quarterbacks in terms of guys that are lower priced that could potentially kind of give you some value. we've already seen Steelers likely ruling out most of their key starters. Ben Roethlisberger, of course. Landry Jones going to draw the start. But I think people are a little bit intrigued with Patrick Mahomes this week, even against Denver on the road. Going to get playing time. He's not going to get, obviously, the great weapons around him. But could you see punting with any of these guys that are filling in for Week 17?
I still don't like playing guys against Denver. I understand they're not as good as they have been, and I love Patrick Mahomes. If Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce were in, then I'd be all in. I'd be all in on Patrick Mahomes all the time. But with this current situation, with Demarcus Robinson basically as his top receiving option and sort of a few other guys that aren't very significant, this isn't that appealing with no Kareem Hunt. You got Charkandrick West and, some other dudes in there. I don't know, man. I like Mahomes. You can do it. It's far from a cash option. He's a runner. He's an athletic guy, but he's more so a passer than a runner. He's not like I'm trying to think of run first quarterbacks, but he's not going to run as much as people think. He's an athletic guy. He's kind of like Trubisky in terms of athleticism. So how Trubisky gets those rushing attempts, but it's not like he's looking to run every play. That's what Mahomes is. Mahomes is a strong arm, throwing bombs down the field type guy. So for those of you expecting to get 10 carries from him, that's not going to happen. But he's certainly, I love the talent. Incredible arm.
Yeah, I think in terms of cheap options this week, you have, I hate to say it, but Joe Flacco is in play for me this week against Cincinnati. Baltimore's got to win to kind of keep the pace and get into the playoffs. Flacco hasn't been under 17 DK points in each of the last 4 games. Upside's really not really there, but against a Bengals team that's been bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, I know they've been banged up. They got healthy last week. I think Flacco can hit value. I think Brissett can hit value. I kind of like the Colts offense this week. I like their main guys. I like Frank Gore, Brissett. I like Hilton.
Well, the funny thing about Joe Flacco is if we just mixed up these games, like his season was basically all his toughest games at the beginning of the year, and these last 4 or 5 weeks are where he actually had exploitable games. So the perception of Joe Flacco really dipped this year, and I do think there is something to that, but he's been great the last month. I think if, QB7 from weeks 13 to 16, he's been awesome from a fantasy perspective, especially, if you had to throw him in season long. He's been great. So I wouldn't be afraid of him at all at this stage. His Jeremy Maclin has shriveled into a, cocoon at this point, but he does have some decent options. It's pretty clear Mike Wallace is the number 1 guy there. So he does still have some stuff there to throw to.
Yeah, and you got Woodhead and Alex Collins who can work at a decent rate out of the backfield. I don't mind Flacco this week. I think the guys I'm kind of most intrigued with in this middle range is kind of Phillip Rivers, Kirk Cousins, and Matt Ryan.
So Phillip Rivers for me, if Melvin Gordon doesn't go, I think that offense kind of falls apart. Not in the sense that it falls apart, but in the sense that they have no balance then, and teams can just, rush for and not really worry about Brandon Oliver, which could obviously create one of those high variance Rivers games. So he's not as safe, even though it's Oakland, as you'd perceive. Also, Oakland trying to slow down the pace last week. So I think that could be another theme this week. And then you kind of get into this middle tier. It's too bad we didn't get to see the Rams play San Francisco just from I want to see what would happen. But Jimmy Garoppolo is really a guy I'm kind of looking at this week in the mid-range.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with firing up him and Marquise Goodwin again this week. Even Goodwin dropped a dud. last week. I just think, I mean, one, he's 63 yards away from 1,000 yards on the year. Like, I'm looking for little things like that, to kind of go with some of these plays who are already in good spots but have that extra motivation. I don't mind Jimmy G at his, higher price tags. I still think you can take some viable options in games that don't matter. Like that Washington Giants game, it's ugly on paper, but you kind of look at these guys. Eli Manning has thrown 45, 57, and 46 times over the last 3 games. He's put up 8, 11, and 31 fantasy point games in those 3 outings. But Kirk Cousins and those guys are still giving it a go. Like I like Crowder, Vernon Davis, and I like Doxson this week. So I'm still going to be looking at this Washington offense, even though there's nothing to play for.
Mm-hmm. So Carolina, Atlanta. Just to check before they are playing for something, yes?
Yeah, Falcons win, they're in. Carolina's still a position thing, even though they're in.
So that's a great game stack game. You know what I'm saying? Division rivals, both offenses know the defenses. Sometimes that's an advantage for the defense when they know the offense, but these offenses pretty strong, at least on the Carolina end. I really like Carolina this week. I really like Cam, Olsen. Also, when you kind of look at the usage the last few weeks, Cam and Olsen is a great stack. I think that Cam Newton is a great option. I think he's a potential cash option this week. The floor is just so high, on him with his rushing production, 50 plus yards 4 straight weeks, or, 6 of the last 7, with a few 70, 80, 90 rushing yard games. So, I mean, he's just been on fire.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind Newton this week. Like you said, like he's got the options around him. We'll talk about McCaffrey in a little bit. I have no issue with Newton. I like Matt Ryan here in the spot. Like he hasn't been great this year. He hasn't shown a ton of upside. His best fantasy point game came against Carolina on the road. He's below 6K on DraftKings this week. I just look at this Carolina defense. They don't scare me right now. Like their passing defense doesn't scare me. And I think obviously Julio Jones is a great stacking option with this one. I think we can see a big upside game, but Carolina 6 fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks the last 5 weeks. Their corners just aren't. They got bailed out by that front 7 earlier on this year. I think we're seeing some clear weaknesses with that secondary.
Let's give a round of applause to Atlanta. Come on, Jason. Let's give it to him. Yeah, Julio Jones, like 10th in targets this year. Great job, guys. Under 130 targets on the year. You guys are horrific. What are you doing? Oh, my God. I was looking at – he has 7 games with 10 targets this year. 7. He's played every game. You know how many Antonio Brown had? 12 out of 14. What are you doing? You have one of the best wide receivers of this generation, if not. And you throw to him 7 times in a game? Like he gets over 90 yards every time he gets 10 plus targets. It's just stop throwing to Taylor Gabriel. That was fun with Kyle Shanahan. I don't know how you can play Matt Ryan. It's not a talent thing. He's awesome. It's just, what are they doing? What are you doing?
I mean, like, what? He hasn't thrown for more than 1 touchdown since week 11 in Seattle.
And he should be throwing 3 a game like he was last year. He almost threw 40 touchdowns last year. Come on, Matt Ryan.
He's a guy who's probably going to throw for over 4,000 yards again this year, and he's going to tap out at like 21 touchdowns. That's going to be what we get out of Matt Ryan, and it sucks. But looking at a weekly standpoint here, I still
week
think
17. He's a fine play though. I just after what he did this year, I have a tough time putting him in there.
Yeah, I mean when it gets to the top here, it's Wilson Brady, both with games on the line. Although I think New England's just going to kind of run the ball and kind of casually stroll to victory against the hapless Jets team that kind of really just fizzled out once McCown went down. Wilson at home. Wilson's dropped kind of back-to-back duds. It's been frustrating, but I think he can get back on track here against Arizona. I have no issues with going with them, but I'm not going to be completely just funneling all my lineups towards both Wilson and Brady because they have something to pay for.
So that's sort of the dynamic here. After last week, you can't trust Russell Wilson blindly like I did last week. I was counting my money before the 4:00 game even started. I was like, all right, Wilson, 35 points. But kind of shut down the last 2 weeks, and the Jacksonville and Philadelphia games kind of made it seem like he was, matchup proof. But, teams that can get a lot of pressure, I don't know that Arizona is that. And I think Wilson is the top play on the board by far. But, that offense is not good around him. Like, it's a bad offense. So I think that is something to be aware of. With that said, with all the players sitting, it's him and Cam. And I do like Cam. Yeah, I'll go with Wilson, man. Wilson's my top play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind going back to the well even after a couple of down weeks. Overall, I think this is going to be a week where I kind of sit in this mid-range and kind of hope for maybe that the Pats just roll through and kind of run a lot, and Brady throws his 2 touchdowns but kind of taps out at like 250 yards. I mean, he hasn't been over 300 yards since week 11. We haven't seen the upside since that week 12 game against Miami where he threw 4 touchdowns. So I kind of worry about Brady a little bit here. He's a little bit banged up. Wouldn't surprise me to go out and obviously see a huge game, but I could just see them playing good defense and running the ball and just kind of cruising their way into the first round bye.
Right. I'm with you.
Let's move on to running backs this week. And obviously, as we get into these positions that become a little bit unclear with guys sitting and guys getting these split roles, we'll kind of try our best to break things down. But, we still have the rest of today and tomorrow to kind of get some more news. But, as far as now, it's Le'Veon Bell, it's Todd Gurley, it's, Kareem Hunt. These guys are all out for week 17. We also saw the Eagles are looking to rest guys as well. They'll play limited snaps. So we're kind of getting a lot of these top guys off the board, but there's still LaShawn McCoy in a game that matters against Miami. There's still the Saints running backs in the games that matter against Tampa. Like, there's still very good pay-up options.
Definitely. And I know Kenyon Drake had a rough last week, but that's just because Kansas City blitzed Miami. Not like literally like describing what happened in the game. I think Drake's a fine play. Barring a horrific game flow, which almost zero chance of that happening against Buffalo. I think he's a great play this week and back in sort of that tier 1 that he was the previous few weeks. So I'm looking at him as sort of a tier 1 guy with all these guys out.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind it. I'm going to be going there with you. I don't have an issue on the other side with McCoy. Dolphins 4th most fantasy points allowed to running backs the last 5 weeks. McCoy put up, 25.6 DK points, 24 touches in the meeting 2 weeks ago. He's been over 19 fantasy points the last 3 games. Like, Buffalo's still going to roll McCoy out for 25 touches here.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. You mentioned before the show that you think Leonard Fournette probably not going to get, a full workload here. It's just the question of, will he break that big run against Tennessee like we saw Todd Gurley do? That's really the big reception, really the question here, because I could see him playing a half. Tennessee is just awful. So it'll be interesting. I think he's a viable tournament guy, but certainly not someone you want more than 1 or 2 shares of this week, especially with Saints running backs McCoy and Drake right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think in tournaments, if we get the word that he's going to be a go and play, 3 quarters or something like that, and has that potential 15 to 20 touch game where he can break out a couple of big runs, I'm for it. Because his price is down. Tennessee's defense has been lackluster. I guess from a fan standpoint, if I'm watching Jacksonville and I'm thinking, okay, he's been kind of injured in the second half of this year, we're heading into the playoffs. Why would I not want one of my best, offensive players just kind of getting healthy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Melvin Gordon, questionable. I expect him to suit up here. I don't know how effective he's going to be this week. He's kind of in the same lines of you can take some GPP shots. He's got 3 straight games with a rushing touchdown. The targets have been there. I mean, he's got 14 over the last 3 weeks. Like
how
touches are
sweet.
there.
How sweet it
Your
is.
sweet Melvin Gordon, your boy here. I still
Oh
think his viability
boy.
is 100% or even 80 to 90%.
Look at those box scores, folks. Just 20 rushing attempts pretty much every game. Getting involved in the receiving game. Just treated like the true feature back that he is. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it's all gravy for us this year. So I don't have any comments on this week. I think that's a really tough that's a really tough call. Obviously Oakland's a great matchup, but as I mentioned, if he's limited or struggling, I think the Chargers offense could really struggle. So probably a stay away from me, especially with the options he's around. But like he's the same thing as Fournette for me. If he suits up, yeah, maybe throw a dart, but I'm not trusting it.
Yep. Zeke, I don't really want a part of this week. I just don't think that he'll play, but I just don't think I'm going to be going there.
Yeah, Philly's run D's been pretty reliable in terms of avoiding in fantasy. They haven't really come back to bite you at all this year. I can't think of one game where you faded the running back facing Philly and it didn't work out. Obviously, Zeke's a special case, but absolute worst case scenario, he gets 100 yards on 25 carries and a touchdown or two. I mean, that's his absolute ceiling against this run D. So I don't know. I think there's higher upside.
There's been 2 guys over 15 fantasy points against the Eagles this year in terms of running backs.
Yeah.
That was Kareem Hunt in week 2, and then that was Todd Gurley just a few weeks ago. So it's kind of been it. I don't feel the need to go there this week. I think we just rattled off about 5 options I'd rather use over him. We still haven't really gotten to the Saints running backs. I like Alvin Kamara a lot this week. I think he's very much in play. The targets continue to be there. As far as the PPR floor goes, he gives you about a 15 to 18 fantasy point floor. I know he did struggle, obviously, a little bit against Atlanta last week, but still caught 7 balls. I'm going to be going back to the well with Kamara, especially with that upside.
Kamara is about as dank as the shoes I just pulled off. Oh, boy, that stinks. But, yeah, I mean, he's just good. And I don't think one game, even with the regression incoming of his efficiency, that is going to happen. Sorry, folks. Next year, he's probably going to see a major dip in yards per carry and yards per reception and all that and touchdowns. But he's still a fantastic player, and he's still going to get his and make plays and make people miss. So, especially against Tampa Bay, if you want to talk about not a lot of resistance, this is the game. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to that game, so I'm definitely going to be getting some Kamara shares in.
Yeah, go try to tackle him.
I could do it better than those third-string Bucks defense.
The Boneless Man? You remember that game?
The
Boneless
what?
Man? Boneless Man, it was a computer game. You'd drop the guy and you'd have to navigate through all the things. No?
You're losing me, man.
Check it out, bro. That would be you trying to tackle Alvin Kamara, Boneless Man.
Let's talk Deion Lewis this week. Obviously,
offense to all the people without bones out there.
Lewis saw 29 touches last week. Obviously, 2 touchdowns. Prices come up a little bit, but I think the workload's pretty stable against this Jets defense that, like I said, they just really haven't been the same defense over the second half of the season. They've really struggled. I have no issue. This game really sets up well for Lewis to get 20-plus touches again with no Burkhead, with James White questionable. It's always kind of been, who gets the usage. It's never really about the talent for these running backs.
Are we worried about funky touch distribution from New England at all, or
I'm not with Lewis.
Hammer down.
I'm for the passing game. I'm much more hesitant on the passing game. I think for me, I'll look at the Lewis Pats D stack, kind of all day this week.
Hey, Carlos Hyde, no Aaron Donald this week, so could be an interesting guy. I don't know what LA's defense would look like without the best player in the league, basically.
Well, I guess it could look like earlier this year
Oh,
when he wasn't available for a few games or wasn't
yeah.
at full health.
Yeah, yeah. No
But
Jordan Howard against Minnesota. Thank you very much. You can definitely play Alex Collins. Jamal Williams, kind of a very sneaky guy. 2 bad weeks against 2 good defenses, and one with Aaron Rodgers back. They're going to be back to running the ball, and you can do that against Detroit. So I'm in.
yeah, Aaron Jones has already been ruled out, so I'm okay with that. Yeah, I think we can kind of dip into these mid-range and kind of fill their running backs this week. Your thoughts? Obviously, we're joking around about Derrick Henry prior to the show. Henry ruled out for this week. Are you on board, or do you think he's just going to be super chalky?
Murray ruled out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I love Derrick Henry. He's my favorite. Well, he's not my favorite. Todd Gurley's my favorite. But, if you're talking about imposing presences, I mean, Derrick Henry, 2,000 rushing yards in 2016, obviously had, or 2015, sorry, obviously had the Heisman Trophy win there, and crazy athleticism for his size. Ran a 4.5 at 240. So he's just a hulking mass of talent. And Jacksonville's run D is okay, but 5,800 on FanDuel, sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with it. Do I think it's a lock this week? No, and I don't think you can consider it a lock. I'm willing to go there, but I'm also willing to fade in GPPs if he becomes super popular, which I kind of expect him to be. And I think that's a good rule of thumb this week is I'm okay with fading, whatever becomes the popular 30%, 40% chalk this week because there's no for sure chalk play for me this week. There's maybe one or two, but I'm willing to fade in tournaments to kind of get an edge if everyone's going to be on Henry and say he only puts up 12, 13 fantasy points.
Totally agree. It's a weird week for sure.
Let's guys filling in for Bell and Gurley this week and Hunt. Do you have any preference here of who you go with? I mean, we were talking a little bit about Malcolm Brown before the show, guy out of Texas. He's 3,900 on DK. Going to be likely the lead back here in week 17 and in a decent matchup. It's not great, but it's not bad.
Yeah, Malcolm Brown, kind of a fun guy to track throughout of his career. Was basically the number one recruit in the country coming out of high school. Labeled the next Adrian Peterson, which is obviously brutal shoes to fill. Never really came to fruition at Texas, and then went undrafted, or I think he went 6th round or something like that. But he's not Todd Gurley. There's no Jared Goff. This is going to be much tougher sledding for that Rams offense this week. But, with 20 touches, he's certainly a talented guy. So wouldn't be surprised if he put up some decent, fantasy points on that type of volume. So he's in play for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. Steelers here.
James Conner.
Well, Connor's out, I believe. Yeah, Connor's out. Sorry to burst your bubble. He's done for the year. It's Stephen Ridley. It's Fitzgerald Toussaint. I think Ridley's going to be the guy that probably gets a little bit more of the bulk of the workload.
Oh, that's right. I did see Stephen Ridley. Stephen Ridley, get out of here. Get out of here, Stephen Ridley. You were gone 5 years ago. I'm not trusting that. I mean, I know it's Cleveland and maybe, one of them runs for 100 yards and a touchdown. I don't know. I just think there's easier ways to go than that.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where it's not a bad spot here against Cleveland, whose defense against the run has dropped off a little bit in the second half. If this is kind of a split workload, which it very well could be, I'm off of it. And I still don't trust it, even if the Steelers come out and say that Ridley's going to be a guy or Toussaint's going to be the guy. I'm kind of staying away from the Steelers this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the right move, personally.
Yeah, I mean, as far as other viable cheap options, like I think I, I was mentioning this earlier. I think Frank Gore is a viable play this week. He's been over 15 points in 2 of the last 3 weeks. Against Houston, he put up 10 fantasy points. Not great, but, still decent. He's a guy he needs, I forgot the number off the top of my head. I believe it's around 120 to reach 1,200 all-purpose yards this season to go for his 12th straight season. Are you buying into these narratives like Frank Gore?
You know what's viable this week? Me doing laundry. I think that's pretty viable at 1 p.m. on Sunday. This is absolutely ridiculous that we're talking about any of this crap. No, I think Frank Gore, I think they're going to run him hard. And I like that call quite a bit just because it's that last week. It's not really a narrative. It's the truth. Like, they're aware of those numbers. He's certainly aware of those numbers. They've been giving him a ton of touches towards the end of the year, not really sticking to that workload type thing they were earlier in the year. So we could see 25 touches this game. I'm in on that.
Yep. If Mixon sits, do you have any interest in Bernard there?
Out of spite, no.
I like the clarification.
Yeah, no, I'm not even thinking about Gio Bernard after what happened last week. Joe Mixon had 5 FanDuel points on his first possession, and things were the money. Russ was counting the money. My Russell Wilson and Joe Mixon lineups were just gonna win me all the money. And then Joe Mixon gets hurt. Gio Bernard comes in, he gets 25 touches. It's just something. So, no, absolutely not.
For you, he's in play for me this week if Mixon sits. Even against Baltimore, I still think he should be able to hit value in this. More of a DraftKings play than he is a FanDuel play for me this week because you can rely on some targets out of the backfield for him. The only other kind of really cheap guy that I'll take a look at this week is, as you mentioned, is Carlos Hyde. Like, he's prices down a little bit lower. Touches have still been there. It's obviously his passing game work has dropped quite a bit since Garoppolo's come under center, but it should be a pretty favorable game script for San Francisco, and I think they kind of win this one out.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's a great play. These are the guys. You can also, Kansas City's backfield's going to have some ownership as well, at least worth taking a look at. I wouldn't be playing them, but I think they're worth taking a look at and just sort of evaluating further if you want to dive into this slate.
Yeah, and the good thing is, I mean, at least we have some kind of idea of what these guys can do, like Charkandrick West, who we've seen in the past as far as other backup situations where we don't have anything really on them,
Absolutely.
So let's move on to wide receiver this week. Obviously, no Antonio Brown. DeAndre Hopkins is looking doubtful. For me, in terms of a top tier, it's Julio Jones and it's Keenan Allen. Those are the 2 guys that I'm looking at. Allen's a guy that I think can have an absolute monster week this week. Targets have still been there. Obviously, his production has dropped a little bit over the last 2 weeks, so it was pretty unsustainable earlier. But against Oakland, like, they don't have anyone to match up with Allen that I'm afraid of. I think he gets it this week and just kind of goes off.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's the top play on the board, really, especially, with all the guys out and with Melvin potentially limited. I mentioned a few weeks ago and last week as well, it's either a Melvin game or a Keenan Allen game. Like, it's not really as much Austin Eckler as much as it's Keenan Allen limiting Melvin Gordon. So those 2 don't have big games together. I think, with Melvin limited, it could be like one of those 17 target games for Allen this week. So he's probably the top cash and tournament play on the board. He's probably going to be chalky, but who cares?
Yeah, I'm with you. Julio Jones is in play for me against a Panthers team that's been struggling against the pass. They just, it's Bradbury, it's Daryl Worley, just 2 guys I'm not afraid to plug in Julio against. We saw it last year. We've seen the upside against Carolina from Julio Jones of late this season. He's put up 20-plus fantasy points in their prior meeting. prices down a little bit. Like, if you don't like Matt Ryan this week, like I think you still want some Julio Jones exposure.
Definitely want some Julio Jones exposure. I joke about the lack of usage, but obviously he has immense upside. So, and we've seen him, dunk all over Luke Kuechly before. So I'm in.
As far as other guys up here, I'm off the Vikings offense this week. I don't think we really see a full picture from them. Michael Thomas, I don't think is healthy. And a wide receiver with a hamstring injury is just really not something I want to deal with.
No, that's just about the worst thing you'd want to deal with. I'm kind of with you on that. What do we think about AJ Green with no Jimmy Smith versus Baltimore? That's sort of a different dynamic than previous matchups for him,
Yeah, it is. I can see it in GPPs because one, the price is down. Yeah, I don't hate it in GPPs.
Yeah. Earlier this year, 5 for 74 on 10 targets, but that's with Jimmy Smith. So, it could be an Andy Dalton week in week 17. That's just how things go.
You're making me sick, Russ. I as far as other games, like I think there's a couple like good game stack guys in here. Fitzgerald, Mike Evans, kind of being those guys where if you kind of anticipate New Orleans going off, if you anticipate Seattle going off, I think it's not a bad correlation play with those two. That's kind of the only way that I use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. Sort of on that correlation thing. I'm not necessarily all in, but if you're trying to make game stacks, that's certainly viable.
Yeah. Are you diving into the secondary wide receivers in Pittsburgh? Juju Smith, Martavis Bryant with Brown out, and Bell.
Hell yeah, I am. Juju, baby. Let's go. Let's talk about that rookie year. He is fantastic, man. He's barely 21 years old, and he's becoming one of the better receivers in the league already. So, with no Antonio Brown taking 15 targets a game, and that's clearly an exaggeration, but Juju in a decent price range, in a great spot. Week 17 Cleveland, I can't expect they'll be on their best behavior. So, yeah, I'm firing away with both him and Martavis.
I like that. I like how you said they're not going to be on their best behavior. Like there's a substitute teacher coming in for the next 3 days.
I mean, it's kind of like you want to talk about missing assignments. Well, there you go.
As far as this mid-range guy, the Minnesota wide receivers I'm out on this week. Tyreek Hill obviously off the board. Philly guys are not playing 100%. Giants are just absolutely decimated at the position. No Evan Ingram, no Sterling Shepard. Are you diving into kind of any of those fill-ins at all?
No.
Simple enough.
Yeah, no, I wanted that silence in there too. I wanted that feel, that almost awkwardness, except we don't really have that awkwardness anymore at this point in our team careers. But I wanted there to be like almost, you know what I'm saying? Like that. Oh, Roger Lewis. Oh, unathletic outside receiver that's small. Oh, it's not good? When your outside receiver is slow and small and not very good and went undrafted, that's not good usually. Or if your receiver's Tavares King, that's usually not good either.
Yeah, I agree. We'll talk about some of these absolute punt wide receivers in a minute. T.Y. Hilton, I'll definitely be looking at this week. Houston 23rd in DVOA against wide receiver ones. Hilton, 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. He put up a monster 37 DK point outing. Hilton's cheap. I like him here. He was kind of keeping me dangling a little bit, but it looks like he's going to hit 1,000 yards yet again this year. He's, for an absolute disaster of a season, he has potential to get about 60,000, maybe 5 touchdown a line this year. And it happened in about 3 games.
Incredible season for him. It really was. If we had any questions about what type of player he was, in basically the absolute worst situation, he still put up a relatively solid fantasy season and, just an overall really, really impressive year for him as a receiver. Devin Funchess is not someone I would suggest playing, even if you are playing Cam. I think you just switch all that exposure over to Greg Olsen. Funchess is purely a contrarian play in that offense now. And what I mean by contrarian, not necessarily for ownership, but, Olsen's the main target there. The only way Funchess is going to dominate is if he's the secondary option now. I think those weeks where we saw him get all those red zone looks and sort of big targets down the field. I'm worried about his 2018 with how this offense looks with Greg Olsen back. So I think that's something to keep a close eye on going forward.
Yep, I agree with you there. As I mentioned, I like the Washington stack this week. I like Crowder. I like Josh Doxson. I think both are viable. Targets are going to be there. Red zone usage is going to be there. They still can't run the ball. P. Ryan's banged up. It's pretty clear that Washington and Kirk Cousins are still just kind of going out there and playing games. Like against the Giants here, like I'm okay. It's a really cheap stack this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with it. I'm with you. I dig.
Good.
Yeah.
I think dropping down here, like the Rams wide receivers are not necessarily ruled out, but they're going to get a little bit of time and not play enough to really be viable this week. I think that's just a whole passing game situation to avoid.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not touching any of them. I think, you kind of look at the Jaguars receivers. This week 17 feels like it has Keelan Cole written all over it, just like that half preseason type feel. This is a Keelan Cole week 3 of the preseason type week. Tennessee's just a shell of itself. D.D. Westbrook, I think both those guys are in play. I also think, Nelson Aguilar is in play as well. Is he going to play?
Yes, he's going to play.
All right. Well, if he's going to play, I like him. I think he's a very interesting guy to sort of, for Foles, we sort of see Foles get exposed last week, but what that means is more short targets, as I was saying. Last few weeks is just going to be short targets. So whether it's Ertz or Aguilar, it's going to be one of them.
Yeah. Only other few guys that I'm really kind of keeping an eye on. I mentioned the Washington guys. Will Fuller this week, I have some interest in against Indy with DeAndre Hopkins pretty much out this week. Hasn't been officially rolled out, but he's doubtful. I don't mind going to Fuller this week as kind of a primetime guy for the Texans offense. It's not a great offensive situation for Houston, but at his prices, he's worth a shot. And I think he's also, once again, worth a fade in GPPs if you're making multiple lineups, because I think without Hopkins, he becomes pretty popular.
Yeah, and Devontae Parker. Oh, never mind.
No, stop. Just stop right there.
Hold on. Let me say something. I'm just stating a fact. Devontae Parker has 22 targets in the last 2 weeks. Did you know that?
I did, Russ. Yes.
Yeah. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
He's very not good. But
he hasn't done anything all year.
He's literally not one good game this entire year. So, but hey, that's what week 17 is for.
No,
our dreams.
No. It's EJ Gaines is back this week. I'm off of the Dolphins passing game. Sorry.
Okay.
Can we at least talk about these Giants wide receivers?
Who?
Well, it is, it is Roger Lewis. It's Travis Rudolph. It's Tavares King.
I like Travis Rudolph.
So
nice productive college player, was a really good weapon for Jameis Winston at Florida State. But he's just really unathletic. That doesn't necessarily matter in the slot, which is kind of where they've been using him, sort of close to the line of scrimmage. Without Evan Ingram, he could be a pretty big, target share type guy. Man, I liked Roger Lewis out of Bowling Green, a former Ohio State player, but I just have a problem playing unathletic outside receivers that are small. It's tough to win in DFS playing those guys,
Yeah, it is. I mean, he's had 32 targets over the last 3 weeks. And sorry, I glossed over. Tavares King's rolled out for week 17 already. So they literally have Hunter Sharp,
Oh,
Roger Lewis,
Utah
Travis
State, I think.
Rudolph, Tavares King as their options. And then after Ingram, it's Rhett Ellison and Jarrell Adams.
Darrell Adams was actually a pretty fun player in college, but um, Hunter Sharp, yeah, Utah State, a pretty good player, but if he's your NFL wide receiver, that's not good. That means you're very bad if he's your starting receiver. So we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna jump into that, I don't think.
No, I'm not looking there either. It's kind of about it for me at wide receiver. I think this is an interesting kind of mid-range week. I don't mind
Yeah.
Demaryius Thomas here. He's the other one that I'm kind of looking at. Once again, no Emmanuel Sanders this week. He's had 36 targets over the last 4 weeks. Like he's been single digits, floor, but he does have a 20 plus fantasy point upside.
He does. He does. He does. Yeah.
Let's move on.
All right.
Tight end this week. It's a lot of these guys are kind of taken off the board up top. This is going to be a mid-range or pay down week for me. Gronk is questionable with the illness. He expects to play practice Friday. Against a Jets team, I could see him torching again. He put up 26 DK points last time out. Jets team that's really struggled against tight ends this year, bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed. Gronk's the kind of clear-cut option for me. I know you were talking about Olsen, but up top, I think Gronk's still the guy really over 5K on DraftKings and over 7K on FanDuel.
Yeah. He's been an easy play the last ever since that Miami game. You just throw him in every week, pretty much. Obviously, you don't love paying the price on FanDuel, but at this time of the year, it's hard to find a guy to get you 8 from tight end. Never mind 15 every week. So if he plays, he's certainly going to be viable.
Yeah, and I think obviously with no Kelsey this week, Zach Ertz is not going to play a full amount of snaps. Those guys are off the table for me. You mentioned Greg Olsen. I don't mind taking some shots there, and especially in stacks with Cam. I don't think it's as safe as a play as you made it out to be, but I don't mind him.
In terms of DFS, let me hedge. Let me change my statement to be more accurate.
Sure, I'll give you the floor.
Okay. I was referring to how the offense is constructed now and why we should be worried about Devin Funchess' sort of target share moving forward. That doesn't necessarily make Olsen a lock every week. So hopefully you haven't turned off the pod by now, or else, you're going to have 100% Olsen like someone did last week. Oh, Greg Olsen, you funny man. No, I still think it's a good play. It's just no Gronk. It's not even close,
Yeah, I take a huge jump down. Jimmy Graham, I don't want any piece of. He's been awful the last few weeks. He's just he's not being used because we've seen Seattle really struggle to score touchdowns, and that means Jimmy Graham's not scoring fantasy points because his fantasy points are just completely derived from touchdowns at this point. I'm off there. Evan Ingram's out. Kyle Rudolph's questionable, banged up. I still don't even like Minnesota as a whole this week anyway. Jack Doyle continues to be a guy who gets targeted. 76 receptions this year for Jack Doyle, likely going to finish with 80. He's been a great PPR tight end.
Yes, he has. He's been awesome. I think this is another week where he could see that 8 to 10 targets that he's seen quite a bit this year. And, you could definitely do, a Colts sort of, not onslaught, but you could do a Colts Doyle Hilton lineup and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I agree. Vernon Davis, I have no issue with this week. Pretty good spot for him against the Giants. Charles Clay, very interesting. Could fly under the radar this week. Miami's been a great matchup for tight ends, third most fantasy points allowed per game. Clay has 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. He's put up 19 fantasy points in that span. Like he's a punt below 4K on DraftKings, and he's below 5,500 on FanDuel. Like it's viable.
It's viable. It's there.
Charles, it's viable, Clay.
Oh, he's viable in so many ways too. He's such a good player. But yeah, no, he's in play. I certainly have no qualms with that.
You going back to the Ebron?
I'm not. It's guys T1. It's basically right there with Gronk now. T1 during the fantasy playoffs, folks. So how does that feel? Yummy.
None of those people that had Ebron all year got to the championship.
Yeah, kind of just a weird season for him. But in terms of target share this week, should be good if he plays. Obviously, Green Bay is exploitable, especially in Detroit. So yeah, I like that play a lot.
I guess I just kind of want to talk. We kind of glossed over Detroit guys: Marvin Jones, Golden Tate, Kenny Galladay, Matt Stafford. I'm not on Matt Stafford; he can go F himself. But everyone else,
yeah. Let's taste that Week 17 tension. Jason.
Are you willing to look at some of their pass catchers here in GPPs this week? It's a really good spot, but it's just there's nothing to play for. I don't know. Lions offense has been trending downhill. They're not a fast-paced offense. I don't know what to do with them.
They haven't really been going to Golden Tate of late, especially the last 2 weeks. Obviously playing against sort of slower-paced teams, but it's kind of been a weird last few weeks for Golden Tate. So he kind of weirds me out. I think Galladay, this could be a Week 17 for Galladay. Marvin Jones, obviously the safest play there, and then followed by Ebron. That's kind of the order I'd go.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anyone else who want to talk about tight end?
Well, we could talk about Adam Shaheen in 2018. I think he could end up being a fringe TE1 in 2018 with Trubisky.
No, I'm going to stop you there because you know who we're going to talk about?
What?
Demetrius Harris for Kansas City. He saw 7 targets last week.
Yeah, that's a good play.
He caught 4 of them for 34 yards. With a inexperienced quarterback, we can always look at tight ends here. He's going to get plenty of run here with Kelsey out, and he's 2,500 over on DraftKings. Like that's true punt territory right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great matchup. Denver struggled against tight ends all year.
Definitely, yeah, I'm with you. So, I like that. I like that, Jason.
Digging deep here.
Yeah, I like that call.
Let's talk kickers real quick. As always, you can head on over to lineups.com and check out the article that Denny Carter did, kicker expert. We also did a pod together, but he's looking at Justin Tucker. He said Justin Tucker and log out this week.
I love that strategy. That's basically what I've been doing all year with the top end guys. So if he says that about Justin Tucker, I'm in. Let's do it.
He said Chris Boswell was the other guy. Robbie Gould very much in play as well with the new San Francisco offense going to town.
Yeah, and I think Prater. Did he mention Prater at all?
No, he had very harsh words for Prater. Very harsh words. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, just based on last week because Prater put up a dud.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Okay.
Defenses this week, it's kind of straightforward for me. Seattle at home versus Arizona, the Patriots at home versus the Jets in just games where they need to win. It kind of seems simple against 2 of the bottom 10 offenses in the league.
I agree, but I also think we have to be, thinking about these teams that don't care games. Maybe the Saints against Tampa, like stuff like that, where the Saints actually kind of care and Tampa's like ready to get John Gruden as their coach.
But that's the same thing with New England. Jets have nothing to play for. New England just wins and they got the home field.
Yeah.
Seattle has to win to get in.
That's true. Okay. Yeah. I'll go with that.
I mean, I like the Saints call. I like the Saints GPP call. I think the Bills are interesting too. Those are an interesting GPP option just because they get gains back. They've kind of been a little bit better against the run of late. And we just look at Miami just continue to turn the ball over quite a bit. And I still think you can play Drake. He's the only one.
Definitely. How about Washington?
Yeah, we just named their pass catchers for the Giants. So
yeah, and Washington's been over 9 FanDuel points in 4 of the last 5 games. Washington's basically an armless and legless man rolling down a hill right now. So, or the Giants are. So maybe Washington can pick them up, throw them in the garbage where they belong, and get on out of this 2017 season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Vikings, I think Ravens will be a little bit lower round if you're looking for GPP pivots. Those are kind of the other two that I would go with. Colts defense. Am I being just too?
You got to be weird this week. No, you're not being weird. I do like Will Fuller though. He's a great player, man.
Well, unless he scores 4 touchdowns, then.
Right, but yeah, I mean, you could conceivably play him with Colts defense and be fine because, boy, their quarterback situation is something else, man.
So I want to ask you a question, too, here. 49ers are basically bare min on both sides against the Rams. Even though they're on the road this week, you're basically kind of looking for 6, 7, 8 fantasy points at kind of a minimum there, and I think that's viable against basically it's their second, third string.
San Francisco's looked really good since they got sort of an at least mediocre offense. So they haven't been putting up a lot of fantasy points, but they can get you into that 6 to 8 point range, and at the minimum, yeah, that's certainly in play. The problem is for me, so kind of like you see this a lot in the NBA and you see this, in the NFL a lot as well. Teams still have the imprint of like really effective offense, even like 1 week after. So I sort of look at like Nick Foles the week after they lost Wentz, the Eagles offense was still humming. And then last week, was when the regression took a hit. So what if like the Rams could conceivably still be just a well-oiled machine, with the running game? But I think there's certainly a play for the men,
Yeah, I think so too. And I can't stress enough how kind of misconceiving there has been some bad run defenses this year that really haven't been that bad. Like San Francisco has been a pretty serviceable running defense. And once again, it really ties into if your offense is putting your defense in bad spots on a regular basis, if your offense is turning the ball over in bad spots, it makes your defense look really worse off than what they are. San Francisco's defense since Jimmy G has taken over, it's been very solid.
Yeah, it's certainly a different team, huh?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like
it's kind of awesome. I don't know anyone who's not rooting for it to happen and him just to be like the GOAT at this point. Even as a Rams guy, I mean, well, I'm a Patriot. I'm a former Rams, now Patriot, but also still a Rams guy now that they're good again guy. So I can kind of root for Jimmy G,
Yeah, I don't mind it. Anything that produces good football at this point.
Exactly. That's where I'm at. So let's go Jimmy G.
That's it for us. Week 17, the regular season's over. Cheat sheets are up on the site now. They will be constantly being edited as basically the week goes on. You can check out DailyFantasyCafe.com for our optimizer. A little bit light on content this week just due to the fact that there's so much uncertainty, but everything will be back for the playoffs. Slate breakdowns will be back from the playoffs. So go check everything out, and we'll see you guys next week.